is also important to mention, as I did with our panelists yesterday, what I've tried to do in sort of bringing this group of speakers together is to touch on at least some tiny portion of the extraordinary diversity of New York City's Muslim communities. Obviously not all of that diversity, but some tiny portion of it, Sunni and Shia, different ethnic backgrounds, ethnic communities within Muslim life, men and women, of course, but then also different styles of leadership, different forms of community leadership. I mentioned, Faiza works at the tricky intersection of faith communities and city government. Sahar works as a peace activist, among many other things, and Imam Konaté as the leader of a masjid, and a clergy person. So different sort of perspectives on the Muslim communities of New York and the role of Islam in the life of the city. So with no further ado, I'll ask them each to speak for maybe 10, 12, maybe 15 minutes at the most, and then we'll have a lot of time for questions and conversation. And I have zero preference.
We're going to defer to the Imam.
Ladies first, Imams first.
Thank you, Henry, for that introduction, and it's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Faiza. Yes, I work for government, but I'm an organizer. I have been working in the Muslim community here in New York City for many, many years. I look a lot younger, I think. I hope I still look a lot younger than most people think. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, very proud Mets fan. Anyone who watches baseball. I grew up in Midwood. It's a very interesting neighborhood. It's a lot different now. It was a Hasidic Jewish neighborhood. So when I think about my sense of community, it wasn't always my Muslim identity. It was my neighborhood. I was walking distance between my elementary school, my junior high school, and high school. Very proud product of public school education. And so when I think of community, it was the folks in my building. It was the people who lived down the street from me. It was the folks that we attempted to play stickball with. My sense of community were my neighbors. In Midwood, we were at that time we might have been one of 2 or 3 Pakistani families on Ocean Avenue. And so when I think of community, it was drastically different than, say, post 9/11. And that is when I always tell folks that I became more aware of being brown, of being Muslim. So my sense of community drastically changed on 9/12. I was a junior in high school at the time. And I remember sitting in our gym class that morning when we received news that something terrible had happened. And no one knew what it was, but that we had to evacuate our high school. And I went to James Madison High School. I think there were about 5,000 or 6,000 students. So it was a very large school. We evacuated and just sort of stood outside. And I remember walking outside and kind of feeling this mist in the air. It was very unusual. And we're not that far from ground zero at the time, but you can kind of wave your hand and feel like soot. And we knew then that something really terrible had happened. Something interesting happened a few weeks before 9/11. I decided to wear the hijab. And it was no spiritual journey. It wasn't a political decision. It was more me saying, I want to know if I can take on this challenge. And it was actually after I started wearing hijab that all these other questions about my own faith and my connection to faith, I began to actually explore them. So, fast forward, standing outside with thousands of my peers, all of a sudden, I'm experiencing this uneasiness, still not knowing exactly what had happened. I remember starting to panic, like most people, and I started to look for community. And all of a sudden, the people who I grew up with, my neighbors, weren't the folks that I was looking for. I was gravitating towards people who were more visibly Muslim, other young women in hijab, who I may not even know. And I remember eventually going home that day, and my oldest brother was a student at East University, right a few blocks from the World Trade Center. And my mother telling me that we can't get a hold of him. And thinking to ourselves that the train that he takes actually is underground, and who knows if he's actually going to be making it out like anyone else that was unfortunately died on that day. And it was those conversations where I started to again explore further what community meant to me. My mother said something really interesting to both myself and my younger sibling. She's like, no one's going to school until we figure out what's going on. And by that time, we had seen the horrific images that everyone else was witnessing. But for her, she felt that we were going to be targeted. Me, who had just started wearing hijab, she started getting phone calls from all over. My family, most of them live in New York City. This has been our home from the very beginning. My father came here in the late 60s, my mom in the late 70s. When Newt Gingrich gets on TV and says we're going to deport Muslims, I don't know where else I would go. I'm from Brooklyn, right? So in those moments, it was very confusing. This is the place that is our home, and all of a sudden we have to sort of face these questions and challenges. And I remember getting a phone call a few days later from my aunt, who said that people in a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Little Pakistanis just has a really huge Pakistani population, that the stores were boarded up within days, that the street that housed one of the largest mosques in New York City was pretty much barren, that people were really living in fear. And I didn't understand that. I was like, what are we afraid of? Are we afraid that we're going to be targeted in the neighborhoods that we grew up in? And of course, being 16 years old at the time, now you guys know how old I am. I was also rebelling. I wanted to rebel against that. The notion that we couldn't go to school or we couldn't go outside. And so I figured out a way to sort of get around this rule, which was like no one can move and everyone has to, stay in my mother's sight. We ran out of milk. And I say that with a smile because I don't drink milk. And so I'm like, I'm the dry cereal person. And so I said to my mom, well, we ran out of milk. Someone has to go out and get it. And I'm like, I want to be that person. She's like, no. And so we spent like 3 hours my sister and I trying to convince her. And she finally just kind of let up because we were persistent. She gave us money, grabbed, our purse, and I head on out with my younger sister at the time. And we walked over to a local pharmacy. It was a Rite Aid pharmacy, literally a few blocks from our home. Grabbed milk, stood in line, and I know some folks are from New York and other folks are from different parts of the country, but if you're going to a Rite Aid, you are sure to spend at least 20 minutes. So, we grab milk, we stand in line, and I was kind of just looking at the magazine rack or, talking to my sister. And I had turned my back to my sister when all of a sudden she kind of like grabs my arm. I turn around and I see, and she's a tough cookie. She's tougher than I am, actually. She's in tears. And I'm like, that's not what happened. She's like, there's a woman, she just came by and she hit me in the head. So how did I not see this? And so as I'm trying to calm her down, this woman comes back, and everything that my mother said that other people had experienced, we were sort of experiencing too. You did this. This woman was hysterical crying. And she said, you did this, you need to go back, why are you here? I mean, she was in a lot of pain and you could tell. But being 16 and my sister being, I think she must have been 11, 10 or 11 years old, kind of witnessing this was really difficult. And I kind of gave her a pass after a while, because she just kind of kept going on and on about it. And like I remember tuning her out for a little bit and just sort of scanning the pharmacy. And so we're in line, and there are people in front of us in line, and there are people behind us in line. There are 2 people at registers right in front of us. There's a security guard in the corner who's peeking over and seeing, and everyone is hearing this woman go off on us. And no one said anything. No one said, and I knew people in that store, my parents knew people in that store that day, and no one said a word. And I remember going to the counter, paying for the gallon of milk, walking home in complete silence, not really knowing how to process that. And the only thing my sister said to me, she's like, we're not gonna tell Mom, right? I said, no. And we didn't actually for, I think, many years later, until we really had a conversation. But there's something that kind of happened in that moment for me, and it was almost like a pledge. I wanted to make sure that I never ever, if I witnessed something that made me feel like uncomfortable in my gut or in my heart, or something just didn't feel right, if I witnessed it, there was no way I was going to be silent and just kind of let it be. Because I'm complicit in that violence too then. And so that really sort of set me on a path when I was back in high school, and as an undergrad, but then also in the work that I decided to do in the years after, working for the Council on American Islamic Relations, working on issues of discrimination targeting the Muslim community, working with young people. I was fortunate enough, and I'll wrap up, and I would love to hear from other folks too, but I was fortunate enough to remember what it was like before 9/11. And we have a generation of young people. I think about my nephew born in 2002, who's going to high school in the fall. I think about him, he's only known a post 9/11 world. I mean, a world where Muslims and Islam is inherently suspect, where you could be targeted in school and bullied by your peers, but also by educators. We've had numerous instances here in New York where we've had, teachers not do enough to challenge bullying in schools or participate in the bullying of students. I guess if there's anything that I'm hoping we can engage in a conversation with you all is, what can we do, what can educators do to help sort of create a space where young people, young Muslims, Arabs, South Asians, feel comfortable enough to be who they are? How are we sort of creating that space, or at least that conversation to explore the idea and the concept of community?
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to ask if you less than 15 minutes, so I want
great.
to take advantage of that and
Yeah.
ask you just a kind of quick sort of follow-up, because I was really struck listening to you. We just had a kind of academic introduction to the study of Islam from Professor Alsahlani from Harvard. And one of the things that he really stressed was the importance of kind of distinguishing, what he would call like the loud Islam, of the kind of stereotypes that dominate the media, from the kind of quiet Islam or silenced Islam of people's faith and their, everyday faith. But I was really struck by your saying that your experiences immediately after 9/11, pushed you to really search for a deeper sense of Muslim community. Would you say, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say that those kind of experiences of Islamophobia on some level deepened your faith? Like, did it kind of feed back on that level into your sense of yourself as a Muslim and your religious life?
I mean, I would say that's correct. I was also, at that time, I felt like I was at a crossroads, and I did feel a deeper sense of connection to the Muslim community, and then by extension, by looking at Islam. I mean, one of the things that I learned later on, studying the teachings of the Prophet and the Quran itself, that feeling that I was having of not wanting to be silent, like that is connected to my faith values. I'm going to leave the religious preaching to the Imam, but there's a verse in the
really
Quran.
value like lay people's faith
Yes.
and understandings of Quran and of the example of the Prophet just as much as Imam Konaté thought we were.
I'm going to be on the spot, but there is a verse in the Quran, and the abbreviated version is like, stand firmly for justice. And I'm like, okay, I feel deeply connected to that because of who I am as a New Yorker, but also as a Muslim. There's a teaching from the Prophet, Muhammad Sallallahu, peace be upon him, that says that if you witness an injustice, it's actually a brilliant hadith because it gives you multiple ways to address the injustice. It said if you witness an injustice, that you change it with your hand and that you take action against it. And if you're unable to do so with your hand, that you change it with your mouth. So you speak out against it. And if you still don't have like the courage to speak out against it, you hate it in your heart. So in my mind, I thought, okay, like I felt just really connected to that. It was almost like a calling. And it's something that's been guiding my work, whether it's been at a community-based organization or even in the halls of government.
Imam Konaté, Sahar,
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Sahar Alsahlani. I am originally from Iraq. I am from the Shia tradition, and I came here when I was a month old. My parents both finished their doctorate at the University of Pittsburgh, so I'm a baby panther. And I have grown up in a very I have grown up in a very, very pluralistic environment, especially since Iraq has been traditionally a very, very pluralistic country. Growing up here in the 60s, I came here when I was 1969, so in the early 70s, there was no mosque, I think, in all of Pennsylvania. So the very first house of worship that I went to was a Syrian Orthodox church. And the Abuna, father in Arabic, gave us the key. And so the Muslims would go to pray on Friday afternoon. And oh my gosh, the Muslim kids were bad. We used to run through the church and everything. And then on Sundays, the Arab Syrian Christian community would have their service. And on Saturdays, all of the kids, whether it was the Arab Christians, the Arab Jewish, or the Arab Muslims, we would all have class together, Saturday school, and learn Arabic. And then we were even badder, we were worse. We used to run around and get in so much trouble. But that was our house of worship. And we had Sister Sylvie, who would teach us all Arabic that same day. And the parents would all hang out and kick it and do their thing and have their Arabic coffee and gossip or whatever the parents do in those days. But the children, Sister Sylvie was very hard on us. She taught us Arabic and she taught us recitation of her own scriptures. So we would actually be split up into groups where we would have to recite the Quran, have to recite the Torah and the Injil, the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. And I remember, that was probably been about the first 10 or 11 years of my life. And recitation is not easy, especially in Arabic. And, I don't mean to be a little snobbish, but the language of Arabic, I can see why the Quran was revealed in it. It's not an easy language at all. And, but to hear the three traditions, three scriptures being recited in the corner where you really couldn't tell which scripture was which, was really an opportunity of a lifetime, and really reminded me of what I think the times of the Prophet were, And as we grew older, the community split up, not because we wanted to, but more Muslims came around, more Jews came around, the synagogues opened up, the other churches, the mosques. So that was my very first interfaith, I think, cooperation. And then, I grew up and I studied in Catholic schools, and then went to JCCs because that was the camp across the street at Jewish Community Center. The nuns raised me. So that was my fabric of the American society to me. Was inherently everything was a multi-faith interfaith cooperation. And Ibu Patel says in one of his books that in the United States, even delivering a baby is a form of interfaith cooperation. You probably have the Hindu doctor and the Muslim anesthesiologist, and he's probably in a Catholic hospital, and you probably have a Methodist, so any kind of, just the delivery of any child in this country is probably a form of multi-faith cooperation, So that's always kind of been in the background of my mind. I ended up becoming a television producer for 15 years in Los Angeles, and that's where I raised my children. They went to Islamic academies. As much as I was so thankful for the Catholic school systems, I was really excited there's Islamic schools now. So my children studied there, and there was an opportunity for them to go to interfaith camps. Los Angeles is very progressive, very progressive. So they went with this hippie Rabbi Linda. So she took 4 Jewish kids, 4 Muslim kids, 4 Christian kids, 4 Native Americans. Every summer she'd take them up to the wilderness, and they'd sleep under the stars and do kumbaya, and just every summer from the time they were 10 to the time they were 21. And every Fridays the Muslim kids would do Jum'ah, and every Saturday the Jewish kids would do something. Every Sunday the Christian kids would have a sermon. And these were kids that all went to their own respective parochial schools. So my kids actually got to go to what you call it, bar mitzvah, and so it was neat. They never missed on anything. And then they just did some of the craziest adventures, rain chants, you just name it. But it was all under this rabbi, and it was just a really exciting thing. She taught them social justice. So I sort of secretly, in between doing these Dr. Phil commercials, I'd be kind of oh, this is kind of cool. You guys are doing what? And eventually, she moved out here. There's a conference center just north of here called the Stony Point Conference Center. And it is owned by the Presbyterian Church, USA, PCUSA, which is a very, very social justice-minded denomination. Very progressive. It was the first denomination to approve the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement. It's one of the first to really say that a marriage is between 2 consenting adults, and it is the very first congregation that has put money into establishing an intentional multi-faith community at one of its conference centers. So it is a conference center that houses 180 people, and it houses Muslims, Jews, and Christians. We all live together, and this gorgeous retreat center, but we run a conference center, but most of the guests are faith-based groups that come, so we joke, it's kind of like the Love Boat, but without the bed. You have the cast of characters that run the joint, and then you have the cast of characters that come in every week. So I work in the gift shop, and then we have 5 farms. So we have a Muslim farmer, she's adorable, she's a hijabi that drives a tractor, and then we have a Jewish farmer, and then our head farmer is Farmer Willie's Presbyterian. We have kitchen, we have 20 chickens, and they're intentionally different breeds and colors. We have a Shalom house where the Jewish community lives. We have a Salam house, and we have a Quaker house. We have a Muslim chaplain. We have a Young Adult Institute, but everything is definitely spiritually infused, and we study social justice, and we specifically study each other's traditions to see what inspires us to do good in this world. And for me, when I first came here, my children went off to college, and I think they just saw that I was just so, either they were tired of me calling them all the time or something, but they're like, Mommy, follow Rabbi Lynn. She formed this hippie commune, and just stop calling us. So I was like, okay, so why not, so that I put everything in storage. I took my video equipment, I was a video editor and producer for years, so I took my camera, my editing equipment, put my doggies and my kitty cat, and I left Hollywood and ran off and joined this commune. And when I was there, I was like, oh, okay, these religious people, these hippies, let me see what it's all about. And I had no idea how rich theology was, mashallah. I had no idea how complex social justice was. I had no idea how sophisticated nonviolence was. And I came here, and I have my uncle, who also has a mosque here. And in Islam, we have 2 predominant denominations. We have the Sunni tradition, and we have the Shia tradition. So So for the Sunni tradition, pretty much takes a lot of its teachings from the Grand Mufti in Egypt, and we have the Grand Ayatollah Sistani in Najaf from the Shia tradition. And my uncle happens to be the representative of the Grand Ayatollah Sistani in North America, you know. So I came here, we've always been very close, but you know, here I am living on a commune, you know, and then here's my uncle living here, so it was really, really nice to get to spend time with him and really craft my Islam in this way, because he's always been this larger-than-life figure, but then to come and really learn about my tradition from other faiths, you know, so being around the Christian community and reading the books on Judaism, like reading Biblical Justice, I learned about Hagar, Hajjah, and how she discovered Mecca and she became the governor of Mecca. And that solidified a lot of my Islam. By being trained by the rabbis and learning about the Torah and learning about the concept of tikkun olam, I really, really identified my principles. You know, that I grew up with rosary beads. You know, between Catholic school, you know, Monday through Friday, the nuns, the rosary beads used to terrify me. It was the chants and Monday through Friday, when you're going to go to hell, and the rosary beads. And then I would go to the mosque on Saturday and the rosary beads, and you're going to go to hell. I never knew how to use them. But then I was sitting with one of the Buddhists who came one time, and you know, we had this Buddhist retreat, and the monk was seeing me with these beads, and he said, "You're awfully fidgety." And I said, "Yes, yes." And he said, "You know, you're from the," he goes, "Are you Ismaili?" I said, No, I'm Shia. He goes, "Well, try reciting this chant." And he said he knew, because he knew that's the importance of knowing somebody else's tradition and understanding it. He said, "Try this." He's like, "Try Ya Ali, Ya Ali." He said this chant that even I had forgotten. My grandmother used to recite it with me. And after doing it with the Buddhist monk, then the concept of dhikr, I finally got it. After all these years of being in nuns and being in the mosque, you know? And so subhanAllah, you don't know what, by studying somebody else's faith and what inspires them to do good in this world, you don't know how it's going to trigger something inside you to deepen your own faith. And I have learned that by the different cast of characters that come through our conference center. You know, like the first week I was there, it was Ramadan. I was polishing our Buddha lamp. I was fasting. And then there was 100 Latino evangelicals praying. You know, they were saying, Jesus, Jesus. I was just in tears. I don't know what they were praying about. It was just beautiful. And then there was, you know, like 50 LGBTQ Jewish kids. You know, I think there was like 30 pagans, you know, combating Islamophobia, you know, and then at night we all had, here I am polishing, just another day. I mean, even yesterday, you cannot believe this, yesterday, because I was in a gift shop, I was there, and it was late at night, and I had a Palestinian archbishop come and buy some chakra healing stones. I had an Ethiopian rabbi come and look for the Pope's encyclical, and I had an Indonesian reverend come and buy a Wiccan Bible. So you just never know, but the idea is that we all respect, and not just respect and tolerate, we celebrate each other's diversity in faith, and we search for what we can pick out and honor to deepen our own faith. And I think that's part of the beauty, and the fact that we can collaborate and turn that into action, that we can all go lobbying together, that we can all affect social change and policy. And the camaraderie is amazing, not just when we're on Capitol Hill and scare the heck out of politicians. Because I've lobbied, you know, I've lobbied with a female delegation of a nun and a witch and a female rabbi and a Sikh and this. People have wanted to give us Halloween candy when we walk around, you know? But it's also so beautiful. You remember Imam when the Pope came? You know, it was probably one of the most inspiring things. We were all there to see the big boss, you know, and we waited 4 hours, nobody complained, and it was just probably one of the holiest days I've ever been with. But we all have the same goal, and nobody wanted to change each other. In fact, we all contribute to each other's own faith, you know, and that's the power of peace activism, and I think that's the power of interfaith cooperation for me. And my children have grown up in it, and so I definitely recommend that in your education, you know, in your teaching practices.
Good morning. My name is Konaté Souleimane. Born and raised in Cote d'Ivoire, which is Ivory Coast, a country in West Africa. My first language is French, but I studied Arabic from my great uncle, who was an Imam. He passed it on to my father, and finally, I learned Arabic, and I was teaching also Arabic language before leaving the country to Egypt, to Cairo, Al-Azhar University, to complete my education. Then from there, I went to Saudi Arabia, King Saudi University, where I changed my major from Islamic background to communication for me to, because when you learn, one of the best ways to send a message is communication. The line of communication must be open all the time. So therefore I came here to the United States, especially New York, for my degree in communication. But you know, we all have a plans in our mind, but the best of together is God Himself. So I came, but what I found out is that while I was coming in, because I came from Jeddah directly to New York, I was asking myself questions after questions. Now that I left Mecca, the Holy Kaaba, now I'm going to New York. My question now, there is a masjid there where I can worship. How can I meet with my Muslim brothers and my Muslim sisters in New York? That was my question. So I came, but we are grateful and thankful to Allah. At that time, there was a masjid, and still, Masjid Malcolm Shabazz on Lennox, between 150, on Lennox Avenue, 116th Street. We used to pray there. But because we are from a French-speaking country, many of us West Africans, at that time we didn't speak English. And most of us don't speak Arabic because 96 was not open yet. We used to go to 72nd, Riverside.
Meaning the mosque, the big mosque in the
Yeah,
city of 96.
yeah, the 96 was not open yet. So we used to go to 72nd or Malcolm Shabazz, or some of us to Imam Talib's Masjid, Islamic Brotherhood.
Where it didn't.
Yeah. But the problem was that, you know, the language barriers there. When you go to the masjid, when you go to service, you wanted to learn something from the Imam, from the sermon, but that was not our case. That's when we start mobilizing our people so that we can open our house, our own house of worship, so that we can communicate with one another with no problem, with no difficulties. So we started with a $1 every month. Each of us would come with $1 every month. Finally, $5, $10, $50, $100. But now in Harlem, we have 10 African mosques in Harlem. So, September 11 changed the faith of Islam here in America, not only in New York, because the Muslims used to live in Charlotte. But after September 11, all the Muslims come out. Come out to send a message to these people. They're not one of us. So now that we start coming from the Charlotte. So September 11, my experience with September 11, do you know that I lost my cousin then? He used to work there. And that Tuesday, that was his day off. He was off that day. But his friend called him, Karim, please go and work for me. So your next off, I will work for you. And they used to do that. He went. What happened? So I got a call from his wife. that Karim was off today, but he got called from his brother, his friend. Now I'm calling, he's not picking up his phone. He's not answering. And now we start investigating, searching, finally. We know that Karim was a victim. You see, Karim is a Muslim brother. I know many Pakistanis, I know many West Africans from Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Gambia. They lost their families there. So it was not about the Muslims. It was about hate. That's the reason we came out. So we in the African community, there is no doubt about it. Islamophobia or no Islamophobia, we were living in fear. Fear because of immigration. Fear because of deportation. So we were not coming out at all. Go run that yellow camp or gypsy camp, send a little bit of money back home. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to integrate this system. I don't want to deal with people because I don't want to be deported. Because I'm here to support my family. So because of that fear, they refuse to go to the hospital. They was not going to the hospital. They go to the hospital when it's late. When everything is finished, the next day they die. We send their body back home. So what we did to encourage them, we sat down along with Harlem Hospital to come up with the idea to establish a clinic which we call Medina Clinic. For West Africans, paper or no paper, they go there because when they go to the hospital, what they do, they provide the hospital with a fake names. Because for them, if I provide them with my address, next day I will be my eyes. So therefore, I'm not giving my name, I'm not giving my address. That's the reason we established Medina Clinic with Harlem Hospital, which is doing a great job today, helping people, not only African today, all immigrants. Medicaid or no Medicaid, you come with $15, they give you a blue card, they take care of you. And we are so grateful. Then when Amadou Diallo was shot and killed by police, that was something. So the African community, the members, you see the children, they see, you know what, immigration is looking for us. Now the police are killing us. We don't have anything to do with these people. So, to leave or to do things was very difficult for our people. To tell you the truth, it was very difficult. But because of our masajid today, because of September 11, that fear left. They say that, you know what, let's go out there, show them that we are Muslims. We are the right people. We love the United States. We will die for America. People must know this because of September 11. No matter what, I know that September 11 has two faces, negative and positive. Islamophobia was born since the day one of Islam. Since the day one of Islam, the dear Prophet ﷺ received the revelation which is Quran. That's when his problem started with the people of Mecca. That's one of the reasons Prophet left Mecca to Medina, because the people don't want to accept the Quran, they don't want to accept Islam. Before that, he sent his companions to Abyssinia, which is Ethiopia today. The first trip was 12 people, and the second trip 75 people to Abyssinia. Why? Prophet was teaching the Muslims a lesson that interfaith is possible, that the Muslims and Christians and Jews can live together. When he moved to Medina, he lives with Christians and Jews. He taught us how to respect people, to deal with people. Even God says in the Quran that you Muslims, you are allowed to marry the Christian sisters and Jewish sisters. So therefore, we are in this together to defeat these people. What happened yesterday in France? Nice. 80 people. 80 people. They greater jihad because Prophet ﷺ, they left the battleground of jihad one time. And Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba, now that we're done with the jihad, greater jihad is coming. And the companions, radiallahu anhum, asked the Prophet, there is a jihad greater than this one? He said, yes. The jihad in nafs. Jihad is your soul. That's why we're doing here today in the United States. Living with Jews, living with Christians, Sikh, everybody, as a community, as one race. That's the greater jihad. Why we are hating one another. So therefore, Islam is a global. Quran speaks everybody's language because when you ask Pakistani, they will say that Quran is mine. You will ask the Chinese, they will say Quran is ours. African will say that Quran is ours. Arab then that there is our own language. So Quran, believe me, Quran speaks everybody's language. That's why Allah said in the Quran, Muhammad will send you as a mercy to all mankind. So we here, open. Let us come together as one, as a house, to defeat these people, Islamophobia. Let us come together as one race, one nation. We can defeat them. I'm proud to, because we are dealing with the freedom of Christians and we are dealing with synagogues. Our masjid, one time, when we did that planning, it was a 72nd synagogue temple.
Pointing was the program from the
Yeah,
Foundation for
yeah, from
Ethnic
the foundation.
Understanding that
And
brought
us.
synagogues and mosques
Yeah,
together.
that's right, yeah, we did project together. Our school, and synagogue and people. And the rabbi even made a joke. He said, Imam, you are taking my spot. I love what you said. I'm going to lose my job. You see, we laugh. We laugh about it. We laughed about it. But you know, it's to show that we as a Muslims, we're not against anybody. These people, Islamophobia, they do whatever they want to do because they ignore. You know, Allah said in the Quran, in closing, that we created you from a single person. And from that single person, we created his wife. From his wife, we made you as men and women. Many men and women. And from them, we made you tribes and nations that you might know one another, treat one another with dignity and respect. And thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of your remarks, but I actually want to highlight one thing that I just think is so important to all of these guys as teachers, and then I will throw it open to all of you. I think it's really incredibly valuable that especially Imam Konaté, but all of our speakers really have talked about both the positive and negative implications of 9/11 for American Muslim communities. I really love the way that you put it, that after 9/11, the Muslims came out of the shadows, the fear left, and I think that's so valuable to these guys because when you teach about Islam and American Muslim life, you can't ignore the context of 9/11 and Islamophobia. You have to address that. You can't pretend that that's not a part of Muslim life in the U.S. But on the other hand, you don't want to present this dark, dour all the time, oh, the Muslims are so oppressed, which in some cases, unfortunately, they are, but that oppression does not define them as a community, right? So if you just think of Muslim life in the U.S. as reacting to these terrible outside pressures, that's such an incomplete view. But so to say that, 9/11 and all the subsequent events have impacted American Muslim communities for both positive and negative, you know, and to talk about the positive part of sort of what not, you know, so Faiza is saying that, you know, it deepened her sense of community and, you know, and Imam Konaté is saying how the experience of 9/11 led to greater visibility and civic engagement for New York Muslims. I think that's such a valuable lesson for you all to share with students.
If I might add also with regards to the interfaith, I think, you know, in society, especially in U.S. history, I think there's always a flavor of the month. You know, and we're just, you know, 50 years ago, John F. Kennedy, when he ran for president, they said that because he was Catholic, you know, no way could he run for president. You know, they were accusing him, oh, he's going to instill Vatican, you know, canon law, and the Vatican is going to give him orders, and he's going to have a statue of St. Francis erected right in front of the White House. You know, so things just repeat itself. If you
All
look
the
at-
saints, that
yeah,
wouldn't be so
all the
bad.
saints, exactly. But you know, if you would put it in Islamic terms now, he was on a jihad to instill, you know, canon law. You know, so cycles repeat itself.
Yeah.
And so there's in every marginalized community, there is an incident, say Stonewall, or there is a civil rights movement, where there's a trigger or a spark, or a liberation movement starts. But with regards to an interfaith movement, that's when you see who your allies are. And that's where your allies come together and movements begin to intersect. You know, that's why where Rabbi Abraham Heschel, you know, marched with Dr. King. That's where, you know, the latest thing in Orlando. A lot of, you know, conservative religious institutions began to deal with the question of the LGBTQ question within their own communities. A lot of, you know, conservative synagogues began to become safe spaces. You know, so a lot of times when things happen to other marginalized people, the Black Lives Matter has really got brought together a lot. The indigenous community, you know, the labor relations movement, the Muslim community. So when something bad happens to another community, you really begin to see the importance of your interfaith partners or your social justice activists or your civil rights partners. And I think that's an important thing that really helps you boost up your own faith because you find out you're not alone.
So, for you guys, any questions that come out of their presentations or left over for you from Ali Hassani's seminar earlier? Or anything else you'd like to ask?
Thank you all for being here. I'm from Chicago, and we have a pretty diverse city. But even in just looking at some of the news this morning, some of the commentary, I don't witness non-experts offering their opinion as much on Islam as I do on anything else. You know, I won't see candidates and even normal people offer their opinion on Judaism or Buddhism or anything else, and yet they somehow almost come across as Islamic experts when they're not. And how does the Muslim community deal with the fact that so many people who aren't experts yet who speak? They're attending
Everyone has an opinion about it.
I just, like I said, when you know, and everyone knows, if they look objectively, how do your community deal with that?
Now, I will say that it's extremely difficult to have an entire faith and a community be defined by someone other than Muslims. And so we do see that. We see pundits on television say Islam says X, Y, and Z, and Muslims are like, it's not quite that way. I think what we've seen, you know, each of us have done some level of like media engagement. What we've seen is that over time there are community members that are in fact speaking out, that are on television, but not nearly as many. We're not given those platforms. In fact, I think there's been a little bit of a shift in the community where we started developing our own platforms. We started recognizing that we need to tell our own stories and define the community ourselves. One young woman who I would encourage you guys to look into, Amani Al-Katabe, she runs a blog called MuslimGirl.com. It is a fantastic blog, and it's basically Muslimgirl.com. It's young women who are defining themselves, talking about all sorts of issues. So they're tackling the political issues, they're tackling, you know, social justice issues, religious issues. They're doing pieces on, you know, on the latest trends, you name it. But there are more and more voices many of them younger voices that are saying, you know what, we're not going to wait for MSNBC or CNN to give us a call and say, hey, can you come on the show and tell us what you think about ISIS? What do you think? How do you think we feel about ISIS? Like, that's such an absurd question, right? I get asked that sometimes. I'm like, how do normal people feel about violent
So, like,
radicals?
how much of your life do you really want to spend thinking about ISIS,
Right.
right?
Right.
About
But
other things on your
I
mind.
feel like it's, over time, there's been more and more people who are just saying enough is enough. We're going to define ourselves on our own terms, and and there's so many of them. There's so many young budding activists too. Sahar referenced the Black Lives Matter movement in New York. Just a few years ago, we had an issue of the Muslim community being targets of unwanted surveillance by the local police department. I mean, there are 250 mosques in New York City, and there was an informant or some level of surveillance in many of the mosques. Many of the community institutions that some of us actually work for were targets of this, just because, not because of any criminality, but because we're Muslim and we needed to be watched. At the same time this conversation was happening on surveillance and challenging this civil rights issue, we had, the stop and frisk issue was a big concern in New York City. I think at its peak, we had 700,000 stops of young black and brown men, mostly, some women, that resulted in no sort of recovery of a gun. I mean, it was a very obvious racial profiling happening in the streets of New York City. So you had Muslim community fighting the NYPD on surveillance. You had black and brown communities challenging stop and frisk and also fighting communities. And there were parallel tracks. And at some point, we kind of realized that we were fighting this alone. This community was fighting this alone. And it was the same struggle, and we came together. So there have been moments where, again, you don't hear those stories on television. Those aren't the sexy stories that get the headline, but there's so much cooperation on the ground in local communities that are actually challenging some of the very issues.
Well, I think let me add it. The mainstream media play an important role to elevate Islamophobia. Because we all know that in media, they're always looking for negative things. They're not looking for positive things happening. They always focus on negative. So therefore, the major focus is the ISIS, the major focus is Al-Qaeda. Otherwise, there is a Muslims who are wanting to use the media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, to send the right message of Islam, but they're not giving us that chance. Because they don't want people to know really about Islam, because if they do, nobody will watch them anymore. That's the reason. That's the reason they focus on negativities. But we did a show with Voice of America, but that was in French language. We talked about Islamophobia and how these people recruit the young people. I said, to them that you don't give a chance to speak up. But when they do something bad, and now you see it, look what happened, open now CNN in Nice, France. Since last night, they're showing that. And showing that image kind of make people angry. And they will come after Muslims. So if things happen like that, you know what you do? Call an Imam, an expert, who knows Islam, and he knows how to address the issue. Ask him a question and he will send the right message. But they don't do that. So, otherwise we are ready. Imams are ready to fight for the United States. We love America. We are Americans. We will fight for America and give us the chance to do so. We are ready.
If I may, I think also with have worked in television for a lot of years, and news, we used to always say if it bleeds, it leads. So it's bottom line, it's ratings, like the Imam said, it's dollars, it's advertising dollars, and whatever is, excuse the language, sexy for the viewers, and that is the first thing that they'll put on the headlines. For example, least, like, they won't say that 10% of the physicians in the United States are Muslims, or that, the second highest, demographic that's awarded degrees is Muslims, but they'll show the image of niece over and over and over again. They'll look for 24 hours, so they pick and choose. But with regards to the speakers, in Islam, the very first thing that the angel revealed to the Prophet Muhammad was the word iqra, which has many meanings, to read, to analyze, to think, to debate, to argue. There are many different interpretations. If you ask a Christian in Zimbabwe to speak on something, it's not the same as if you ask a Christian in Switzerland or a Christian in Cuba. So it's all about context, so God gives everybody his own moral autonomy, in Islam. We are born, we're not born with the concept of having sin. We're all born free from sin, but we have the ability to make our own judgment. So everybody has their right to an opinion and to decipher everything at a time and place. So, something can happen, but you'll have a different aspect, you'll have a different reaction, they'll have a different reaction. So there's no way of really comparing oranges and apples. And they don't generally show diverse views of Muslims on panel discussions, and the diversity of, it is the most diverse religion in the world. It has, what's the latest, 1.5 billion or something, just demographically, it looks like a Benetton. I mean, it is so diverse, economically, educationally, geographically, and it's and according to Islam, it's okay to have different opinions. Like I remember one time I was at a mosque, and the Imam said during the time of Prophet Muhammad, he would go to a mosque in 4 different corners, would have a different, jurisprudence. They would be interpreting 4 different ways, and God could be smiling. I mean, we were using our marbles and we're challenging each other, and that's okay. But I think sometimes they handpick a certain celebrity status with just this narrow-minded, and they don't listen to that diversity that really, really represents Islam. And for example, here with the stop and frisk, there's some schools of thought, there's some imams that say, we want the NYPD in our mosque, because if there's something going on, we want to know about it. And there's some, my uncle's one of those. I'm in Ferguson running around saying, oh, the police, whatever. And then my uncle's shaking hands with, Ray Kelly in his office, so there's totally different ideologies, but whenever I go, and I'm like, I just want to let you know that I'm going to go to this protest, what he'll say to me, he'll say, if you believe in it, I support it. And that's the real beauty of, I think, of Islam.
And as extraordinarily important as all of these kind of issues of post 9/11, Islamophobia, media representation issues are, any other questions that have nothing to do with Islamophobia or media representation? What's that?
We love this question.
All right. Well, then any other questions as well?
In your personal practice and daily lives, gives you most joy or most meaning from your religion?
I don't think I would be a feminist or a social activist without my Islam. I think that, I think my confidence, I don't have enough swagger to wear the hijab full time, so I don't. I'm so proud of you. I think you kind of have to have swagger to wear it every day, And I don't, but I think I would not be a feminist, and I don't think I would be a social activist if I were not grounded in my Islam.
Can I pause on that one for a second? I don't have to tell you now we're back to popular media and Islamophobia, but the media generally does not represent hijabi as requiring swagger. Veiling is too often described as the absolute opposite of swagger. So say a little more about your choice.
I think it takes a lot of guts to conviction, mashallah, to cover it. You have to do it for God, not for, like if you're, like the Sikhs have the swagger, the nuns, the Amish, the Hasidic, both have it, and it's something that comes from within inside you, that you do it for conviction and for purpose, and I wish I could do it every day, and hopefully one day, I'll be able to, but I kind of, I kind of rely on that, but I think it takes a lot of inspiration. Hopefully I'll get there. But I think that teaches me to use my heart and my mind, you know, and it's definitely a feminist religion for me.
All right, so back to sources of joy.
Yeah.
Sources of joy in everyday Muslim life.
Yeah, because, you know, Islam, to tell you the truth, is that it is not about how you dress. It is not about how you act. It's not about how you dress. It's not about how you look like. But it's from here, from heart. Because the Prophet said so. Said Islam is from here, approved by your actions. When you say that you are Muslims, how do you know that you're Muslim? When you perform your daily prayers, and you follow the way of Prophet, and you follow the Quran, we all know from there that you are Muslim. But there is a believer and there is a Muslim. But people don't know the difference sometimes. They don't distinguish between Muslims and believers. This is a very important. Muslim is someone who performs the daily prayers. By performing your daily prayers, you are Muslim. But Imam is to believe in Allah and all the books and all the prophets, the messengers, from Abraham, from Noah to Abraham, to Jesus, to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It doesn't matter. You must believe in them. If you do, you are a believer. The Muslims, they fight. They condemn people. Oh, you're this, you're that. But the believer, because he believes in Allah, he believes in Quran, he believes in Torah, the gospel, the Bible, name it. So he deals with everybody. That's the difference, because people must know this. Even if you know in the Islamic circle, we are forgetting also about the group, Salafism. Salafism is there because we have problem ourselves. Yeah, inside we have a problem. Now I'm sitting here talking to you. If one of them see this sitting here now, he will come down and say, you know what, we must kill him on command. Because he's sitting there watching, talking about, with a bunch of non-Muslims. So now you say, Imam cannot become kafir. See, that's the problem. We are struggling ourselves inside. So, me, alhamdulillah, when I perform my daily prayers, helping people, finally, when I go home, I'm so relaxed and so happy. Why? Because I made a difference. I remember one time, a reporter from New York Times came to me in my office. Asked me, Imam, come out to me. All know that you came here for your degree. Did you get it? I said, yes. She said, from which university? I said, University of God. I said, you know, you're sitting here now in my office. People will come to me with a problem, crying, searching for solution. When I see them leaving my office with happiness and smile, I say, that's my diploma right there. So I'm so grateful and I'm so thankful because I know that I'm doing something good. Because of Islam, I am connected. No matter what we do, we're not perfect people. We make a mistake, we are creation of God. But you know what? Let us make different. Yeah, Islam is a beautiful. For example, Ramadan, we just fasted Ramadan. When you fasted Ramadan, I was sharing that with Ramadan. And it was like, this is a gift. Leaving your coffee, water, food, everything, and daily basis for 1 month. Spirituality. You are connected. You are connected in God. If you don't do it, you don't feel good. You're like, oh no, I'm doing something wrong here. But when you do it, you feel like, oh, yeah, happy. Only God is rewarding me, but I'm doing something positive here. See, when you used to it, you don't do it, you will cry all day. So therefore, it's so beautiful because you do it here to, to learn more and more about Islam, and because of the you will benefit from it. Because of global, it is everybody's religion, no matter what denomination, no matter what country you're from, it's for everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, daily, you said a daily activity. So I'll say two. One is definitely prayer. I think that there are multiple moments where you sort of have the opportunity to disconnect from everything around you and connect to something much larger than you. So like having that moment to sort of let go of everything and have a spiritual connection with something far more powerful than you is really, really helpful, especially in the line of work that some of us do. It's easy to sort of get overwhelmed and caught up, and then you have this opportunity to just pause for a second. So prayer does give you that pause.
You could say, no, sorry, I can't make that meeting. I have to go.
Oh my, no, it's like, I'll be late to that meeting if you're like me. The other thing I'm utterly embarrassed about, but I feel like I'm amongst friends, so I will share. I watch General Hospital every day. And I will DVR it and get home. Talk about unplugging from all things around you. And I know I don't fit the demographic of someone who watches a soap opera, but I've been watching it for many, many years. I don't know. It's not a good question. It's just a nice way to sort of really, really unplug. Anyway, Mom, I'm embarrassed. Unplug and watch a
I watch
fun
TV
show.
myself, but my favorite show is a comedy.
Oh, is it?
We all do it.
Trust me, the soap opera can get very comedic. People come back to life. It's great. It's great.
It says something so deep that I don't even know how to understand about that the sort of blurry line maybe between the religious and the secular. That
Yeah.
you would sort of describe the daily prayers and your soap opera habit as filling a kind of similar place in your life, the sort of moment of peace for yourself.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness with General Hospital. We have some more time, Dan. Oh yeah, Sam.
So one of the things that we were discussing earlier is that Christianity is kind of like a religion of belief, like you're a Christian because you believe, and Islam has like a different take where it's a religion of practice, like you're a Muslim because you do your prayer or you adhere to what the Quran says. Do you think someone can do those things and still not do those things and still be considered a Muslim? Like someone who doesn't always pray or someone who might drink or do something like this, are they still considered a Muslim?
He's the thing, but only God knows. From what I understand, a Muslim is anybody that submits to a higher power, to the will of God. Not necessarily somebody who follows Muhammad, somebody who submits to the will of a higher power, meaning the message of God and what he stands for. Only God at the end of the day can really judge. I know some people, I can go to the mosque growing up where the ladies would be praying 20 times a day and fasting, they'd be in the court fasting. And then there'd be some that might be forgetting to pray because they're so busy, but they roll up their sleeves and they work and they turn their faith into action. So I don't know, for me it would be kind of blasphemous to really know who's a Muslim and who's not a Muslim. For me, it's only God that can choose. I don't know, but maybe you might.
Yeah, I just mentioned that we are not perfect. We are not perfect creation of God. I know it's a very difficult to be a Muslim person because Islam, the definition of Islam itself is a total submission to Allah. Everything you own, everything you do must be related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's Islam. Then the practice will come. Because when you take Shahada, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, testifying that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Yes. Now the door is open. What is next? It is practice. Prayer, fasting, going to Mecca, your charity because Islam has five pillars, right? The fasting of the month of Ramadan is part of it. But you have some Muslims, they pray, but not the regular people. Or some of them might pray every single day, 5 times a day, as we mentioned, but they do. I know some of the Muslims, they in the masjid every day, but from there they go to the corner and drink the alcohol. Even though alcohol is okay. Right? And some of the Muslims, they commit fornication. Even though we all know that fornication is not, it's forbidden by God. But Prophet ﷺ, according to some, the way of Prophet, somebody like that, if you die, what we do? Prophet said, wash his body, do his funeral, pray on him, and bury him with the Muslims. Only Allah will judge him. Because I'm not here to condemn people. I'm not here to judge anyone. Paradise or hellfire, don't belong to me. I didn't build them. My father didn't build them. Why am I going to sit here judging people? You're going to Jahannam hellfire. You're going to paradise or not. So Islam, it is all about dignity and respect. You must respect people. Stop judging people. Show them the way of respect. Maybe they must change their mind one time. I'm so happy when I leave my building, going to the masjid every day. Non-Muslim kids, they're standing in the corner selling drugs. But when I pass by, they will say, Assalamu alaikum, Imam. When I grow up, I just want to be like you. And it makes me feel good. Because it tells me that I'm doing something else because I've treated everybody with respect it doesn't have. We are human beings. We are creation of God. That's my answer to your question. I hope you're satisfied.
I'll just add one thing really quick is that, and I'll share like a personal sort of, my personal perspective is that my own connection to Islam has ebbed and flowed, and it is strong in some moments of my life, and it's not so strong in other moments. So I would never want someone else to judge my sort of conviction based off of whether I pray regularly, whether I fast or not. So I think it's really important to sort of keep that in mind that we are human and our spirituality sometimes, it's not always like unwavering. So that's one thing I would love to share. And the other thing is that we didn't talk a little bit, maybe you did, but not enough about this, that there is a concept of forgiveness in Islam. So, God is most merciful. So again, you're human, you fall off maybe a path, but there's always an opportunity to come back. There's always an opportunity to strengthen your faith. So I'm in no place to condemn someone for not being Muslim enough. I think that's like it's like a conversation that is always changing between you and God.
I wanted to follow up on one thing. Thank you, but I wanted to follow up on one thing. This is a more kind of grassroots community life question. It was less theological. But so I was struck, Imam Konaté especially, but for everyone as well, when you were talking about the need that you felt to work with other members of the African immigrant community to build Masjid Aqsa, specifically African immigrant mosques. And there is a lot of, from what I know of Muslim life in the city, like there are some mosques that really everyone comes to, but then there's a lot of mosques that are very much associated with a particular, ethnic group or immigrant community, and everyone else is welcome. No one's ever turned away, but there's definitely like ethnic concentrations at different mosques. And I wondered if there's anything, you talk about that in terms of the language barrier, and you want to hear a sermon in French, which makes perfect sense. But are there any other differences that you've seen, like in the practice of Islam? Are there ways that that, West African Islam, or what you were raised with, is maybe different in subtle ways, but meaningful ways from, like, were you ever surprised when you first came to New York, like what other Muslims were up to? Not to condemn them at all, but was there anything that, like, kind of, those sort of differences where you thought it was important to have, like, the kind of Islam that you were raised with, like, in a West African mosque?
Thank you. I was not surprised because Islam is one. The prayer is the same thing. Says that the teaching prophet of the prophet is the same teaching. He passed on to the companions, generation from generation to our time. But the problem is, sometimes we kind of mix Islam with culture. Islam with the tradition, that's the problem. Sometimes. So here in African community, you're right. Some of the masajid, we have 10 mosques today in Harvard, and almost 50 mosque Africans in Bronx alone. But when you go to this masajid, what happened? There's someone is not reading in French or English. They gave someone in Fulani. For example, Senegalese. When you go to their mosque, the service in there is in Wolof. They will speak Wolof. Maybe they will summarize a little bit some of the main subject in English in 2-3 minutes. That's the problem. But the experience of Masjid al-Aqsa, that's why the Masjid al-Aqsa is the largest and all these masjid, African masjid in New York area. Why? Because the sermon is in English, French, and Arabic. We speak Arabic, English, and French, so that everybody can understand. Because there's some of the sisters, when the khutbah is in English, they were only the complaint. French, they say that we didn't go to school, so we don't know French. So now, little bit in our language, which is a Madingo, but mostly English. That's how we do. That's why you see mixed Jama'ah, Bangladesh, Pakistanis, Arabs. So every Friday we have almost 1,500 people coming to participate in Jummah. But our problem is that we mix culture with Islam, and we mix the tradition with Islam, and to help ourselves look good in front of people. For example, let me give you an example. When we come to what do you call it? This, forgot it. She's, cutting the genital of the girls.
Oh, circumcision.
Circumcision, right? La circoncision en français. So, according to Islam, it's not even so much the way of prophet, but it is a culture and tradition for some of the tribes. We have to do this to clean her, because if we don't do it, the evil will live inside of her. It's not true. That's an example. The mixing tradition with Islam. Yeah, that's a small example of the
It's a big example. I don't think we can really do justice to in the 5 minutes we have left.
But also, like what I noticed growing up here, being from both, American and Arabic, they're originally, the first generation is usually, immigrants is more of a community center. Like you'll see a Hungarian Catholic church, an Italian Catholic church, and then people want to preserve their language, they want to intermarry with themselves, their music, they use it for baby showers, wedding showers, sock hops, you name it. As the generations grow up, they start to intermingle. But culturally, you see religiously, it is a little bit diverse. I know for me, like the Shiite tradition, we're like the Catholics. We cry a lot, we wail, we do this. But if I go to the first time I ever went to a Sufi, oh my gosh, they're singing and they're dancing. Oh my gosh, so it's like if you're a Quaker and you go to a Pentecostal service, you just start to intermix. instances are where you start to see it, I think is where it's different.
Right. Faiza, do you see any? No?
I'm hoping you get another question.
Okay, yeah, no, we have time for one or two more questions. Yeah, Michelle.
I think that when people don't have a lot of knowledge of Islam, particularly when it comes to women, that there is a concern, and I love what you said, Sahar, about how you thought it took swagger and courage to wear the hijab. But I think the average teenager's view is that it's somewhat oppressive to women. And I'd like your viewpoint. I certainly don't believe that's true, and it certainly doesn't sound like it's true to you, but how would you answer that question to to American teenagers who have really no knowledge of that and see it as a limitation?
I think the hijab is actually very liberating because I suffered personally from eating disorders for about 30 years of my life. That's how I ended up having a heart attack at the age of 39. You know, and I think the hijab dignifies me. I think it makes people listen to me, want to know who I am and what I have to say and what I'm thinking. I think if I see a woman in a bikini on the cover of a magazine, I think she's more oppressed than somebody who's wearing a hijab. I think it's very, very dignifying. I think at the times of the prophets, I think almost every female biblical character or scriptural character or female in the scriptures is usually covered. You know, and there's a reason for that. It's modesty. And it's up to you. Like I said, we all have our own moral autonomy. But I think it's a woman's choice. You know, the onus of modesty is really on the man in Islam. The man is supposed to lower his gaze. The woman isn't really supposed to cover up. You know, here they put a lot of victimization on the woman, but in Islamic culture, the man is supposed to lower his gaze. The girl's not supposed to cover for him. And the responsibility is on him, and that's not true in American culture. So that's why I think, you know, from a feminist perspective.
I don't want to put you too much on the spot, although you already shared about general hospital. So you're obviously willing. But if you could, I wonder if you could think back and talk a little bit about your decision when you started to veil. What was that for you personally as a choice, and what were the factors that you had on your mind?
Yeah, so it was definitely a choice. At that time, my mother, my aunt did not wear hijab. They wore, a shawl like this. We're from Pakistan. For me, it started off as like something that I thought I couldn't do, and I couldn't give myself not a non-shallow reason why, and it became like a challenge. It was like, can I do this? Can I have people sort of like look at me and accept me if I cover my hair? And so it started off that way, and then it very quickly became something else. I did notice people treated me differently. All of a sudden I became like a foreigner, and I was like, oh my god, this is weird. I didn't know what that was like. I think to your question, like how do you have the conversation with young people who may see it as like a sign of oppression? It kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier of like uplifting people and their stories, other women. 17 magazine, I also can't believe I'm referencing 17 magazine, but like just a few months ago, they started sort of sharing stories of like young Muslim women in like high schools across the country, and like their reason for wearing hijab, but also like how else, in what other ways are they like equally amazing? It's like you started to see, flipping through a magazine, like seeing a young girl in hijab sitting on her bed because she's writing a blog or whatever it was. It was, I think the opportunity whenever it presents itself to sort of humanize Islam by uplifting stories of other young women. There's so many examples. There's a woman who's actually in the Olympics right now, Ibtihaj Muhammad. She's a fencer. She's like representing the U.S. in the Summer Olympics. There's story, and she's from Jersey, so we'll forgive her for that. But like, so many examples. I'm sorry. And she's in hijab doing this. So there are so many incredible young women who are out there, so many role models. You don't see them on television. You don't hear their stories. Actually, Ibtihaj was on Ellen. And I remember that story sort of kind of going viral. But it's like uplifting those women. you know, I wear hijab now. I remember someone in the subway asking me, telling me to go back in one of those rare moments in New York. There aren't that many, at least I haven't experienced too many of them. So I kind of like, go back to where you came from, why do you wear that? And this is American. It's like, I feel so American with my hijab. It's just, and it's something that I can't describe. It's like, I don't know how else to say it, And so I remember having a conversation, of course we disagreed, but it's just such an intrinsic part of like who I am that, whenever I get a chance to sort of talk about it,
I think hijab is described by God himself in the Quran. Hijab is to show the beauty of woman. Because when you see a sister wearing hijab, not only respect her, it's going to show respect. Because Islam, most of the people think that Islam came to enslave women. It's not. Islam gave a freedom to women more than women. When you see, for example, when you enter the church or you see the picture of Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, what do you see? Hijab. Because it's kind of connection to God. It's kind of show because God wants men to respect women. Whatever we are looking for, if you show that I'm not going to go after you. But if you hide it, I will say, what's she hiding? I'm going to do it. I have to go for it. You see, now you get more respect from the women. But if you show everything, it's okay. It's a civilization. I'm not against it. But you know what? I will say, I'm done with that. But let me go to someone who's hiding whatever her beauty or whatever, because hijab, believe me, when I see my woman of this hijab, alhamdulillah, it's the total respect. But it's not like if you don't wear hijab, you're not Muslim. The Islam is here. But it's kind of show your beauty, and people respect you, and they will say, Assalamu alaikum.
It's like when you see a nun,
Yeah,
I grew up with
yeah,
a
that's
nun.
right,
Now,
yeah.
if you see a nun who wears a traditional, there's automatically a sign of reverence and dignity. Like, I don't know, how often do you see a nun that really wears that anymore? I kind of get a little giddy when I see there's automatically a nun, but they don't wear it anymore.
Yeah.
Same thing.
I think we have to end it there,
Thank you for having
unfortunately, because
us.
we need to make it to Juma. Some of you, I suspect, need to make it to Juma. I know you do. It's at your masjid. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Oh, thank
Time,
you.
but also not obliged.